Hello everybody, Zoe here. It's time for this week's grammar lesson. This week we're talking about a phrase, an idiom. I love this phrase, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less where we eat, I'm just really hungry. So we say this phrase a lot to convey the point of not caring. So why do so many people say I could care less instead of I couldn't care less? I'm gonna keep this one less technical and more of an explanation as to why I believe that we should always be saying in writing I couldn't care less as opposed to I could care less. But I also want to talk about the other side and how so many people say I could care less and believe that it is an acceptable version of this phrase. So let's dive right into the history of this idiom. It comes from British English, as do lots of our favorite phrases and idioms. From the turn of the 20th century is where we first see this in British English. It's found in American English starting around the 1940s, and it's first incorrectly used somewhere around the 60s, 1966. We see I could care less instead of I couldn't care less. So I want you all to keep that in the back of your mind. The only time we see this mistake is in American English. Let's talk about the actual words in this phrase. When you couldn't care less, you are down here at your level of caring, right? If you could care less, there is a level of caring underneath where you are. So they actually mean completely different things. Although you are trying to convey the same point, that you just don't care. Like, I could care less what you do this weekend. You're trying to say that you don't care, but you're saying that you do care. So technically, it just makes more sense to say I couldn't care less than it does to say I could care less. And that's how the phrase originated, was I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less who you marry as long as you're happy. That means that you don't care who the person marries as long as they're happy. It's the happiness that you care about, not the person that they marry, so you couldn't care less. But maybe you'll hear your child say something like, I could care less about this stupid math equation. They are trying to say that they don't care about the math equation, but what they're saying is that they actually do care a little bit about the math equation, even though we know they're trying to say that they don't care. People who are for the acceptance of I could care less, there are two arguments as to why we think people say I could care less. So let's talk about the first one. Some people believe that people say I could care less because they're being ironic or facetious, and that it's not to be taken literally. So people are actually intentionally flipping it on its head to say I could care less, to show that they don't care by saying that they do care. I'm super skeptical of this theory. I just don't think that people are flip-flopping an already perfectly good idiom to make it into the opposite of what it was to get the point across that was already made with the first one. The second explanation, which I definitely can see a lot more, is that we dropped the int or the not to say I could care less to make it easier on ourselves. It is my opinion that in the US, we created I could care less out of I couldn't care less because we got a little lazy and we just started saying it and it got more and more widespread. I do want to play devil's advocate for a second. An idiom by definition does not have to logically make sense. Think about something like head over heels, right? We're most of the time head over heels, but we're trying to say that we're dizzyingly in love with somebody. Shouldn't it be heels over head to get that point across? So some idioms don't have to actually make sense for them to convey the point that they're trying to convey. However, in this case, I strongly believe that we're not being ironic, we're not being sarcastic, we're just got it wrong and started saying it incorrectly. And that is only my opinion. I completely value all of the opinions out there, and some very, very highly respected linguistics professors believe that I could care less is perfectly acceptable. Here's my takeaway, y'all. If you say I could care less and you've always said it that way and you're not gonna change, that's all right. A lot of people think that it is so widely used that it's okay to say I could care less. But I hope that giving you this kind of interesting history of where this phrase came from and how we literally turned it into the opposite of what it was meant to be might make you rethink next time you're about to say I could care less, and maybe you say that you couldn't care less, which is what you're really trying to say. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to come back next week for our next lesson. Have a wonderful day, y'all.